ladies and gentlemen. Here we are talking about the Maori oral narratives. There are a lot of lenses that this can connect to, specifically cultural, historical, religious, and philosophical, but then also futuristic. Um, so, with that being said, let's just kind of deep dive in. The first several paragraphs um, are really sort of contextualizing and giving us a historical lens and its connection to memory. That history is often written specifically by the victors, and how sometimes history is specifically written by those who win, where we paint ourselves as heroes. This sentence right here, um, I found to be extremely powerful, focusing on how our memory and history is skewed by what remains versus what is forgotten and what is suppressed. Um, there's some great facts down here about how history is shaping the past of those living in the present. And then this section right here really focuses on the idea of, is any version, written or oral, really reliable in depicting accurate history. So I thought that was really an interesting view on it. If you look at the bottom of the page, there is a juxtaposition to the Alzheimer's source, talking about mingling like the past and the present and how it causes confusion, and how it's dynamic and not static. So, as we continue in this paragraph right here, we're really sort of focusing on the relationship between perspective and reality. And then we sort of go down here and we start talking about the arch rebel, sort of focusing on how marginalized communities are sort of often villainized in written history, and again sort of goes back to this idea of how we villainize certain cultures, how we paint other cultures as being heroic, and again it sort of reiterates that there is this idea that history is defined by family connection and not necessarily societal or national connection. So there's this idea here, and then again it's referred to down here about the woman's focus on her own knowledge. This idea references false nostalgia based on the idea that identity is shaped more by personal memory rather than collective memory. So then further down, you might if you are interested in the religious angle, and the religious lens, you might want to take a look here about how the religious lens connects to nostalgia and memory. And then also this paragraph down here about um, predicting what's going to happen in the future. How can the future be incorporated into this theme? This idea that what we're focusing on in the present is going to be our future, and will ultimately be someone else's past. Um, and again, it goes into, on the next page, talking about genealogy and how that is the backbone for all Maori history. Um, there's this example here when we're talking about the riddle, going again into the religious lens. Um, and then down here, also reiterating this idea of how religious affiliation, or how our religion and our faith sway our interpretations of memory or historical events. How do you account for that implicit bias when you're recording history? Um, so for those of you who are, you know, sort of following and interested in taking a look at bias, that might be a direction that you want to go in. Again, on the next page, we talk about both the religious lens and the futuristic lens, with creating histories that are predictive and telling the truth. And it's reiterated again here when we're talking about how it's infused in the Bible. So then we get a little bit more political when we're talking here about how history is in the hands of the leaders versus in the hands of the people. This is obviously talking about the Maori, but again, you can sort of associate it with any um, group, whether it's religious or cultural. Um, so this is on the next page. This is kind of what we were talking about, different histories, then different heroes. And further down in this paragraph, right here, as in life, our perspective is often our reality. So even though it's valid, it might not be complete. And it might not be an accurate representation or reflection of events. So that's something that we need to consider and take into consideration. So then next, we sort of get into a little bit of the gender issues and the gender aspect of this, focusing on women having strength. Women are often not associated. Woo. Um, wow, I jumped lots of pages. So right here, did it again. But this time I know where it is. This section right here is that women are also usually the composers. It's women, therefore, who are the first conveyors of history. But even though it says that, I found that interesting because most of our written history is actually created by men. Um, I talked about, so then the article goes into talking about the house destroyed is to be most feared. And I connected it to that haunted house photo. Um, this right here I found to be very interesting. This might be a potential solution. That faith and ritual is a proposed solution to recollecting history accurately. Um, and then this section down here, these 2, 3 paragraphs, is really good information if you want to explore the idea of memory and history in terms of depicting a culture. It really sort of talks about how our own history is retained, how our history is passed down. So that might be something that you might be interested in. Um, and then um, lastly, at the end, this last sentence where the this question sort of comes up: how can the telling of history ever really be reliable if it can never be neutral? And how feasible are this how feasible are solutions to try to make it neutral, um, in order, like, how feasible are those actual solutions in an effort to try to remove some of that bias? So hopefully that helps. As always, let me know if you have any questions.